Hi, Blazers. Dr. Roz here. We're going to take a look at the last part of energetics, which is cell respiration. So yesterday we completed photosynthesis, and today, Tuesday, we're going to take a look at just an overview of cell respiration. And then I'll have some notes for you just to make sure that you have those set. And then Wednesday is a no new contact day. And let's see, then Thursday we'll look at in detail the first part of cell respiration. And then we'll conclude Friday with the last half of cell respiration, just to make sure you know where everything is, has been centered and where things come from. So today, just kind of an overview. So when we're looking at cell respiration, what we notice here is that the product over here of photosynthesis becomes the reactant of cell respiration. And the reactant of photosynthesis becomes the product of cell respiration. So they become kind of opposites of each other. That's what we're going to look at today. And then I'll also have, excuse me, I'll also have some notes for you that give you the distinctions. They compare and contrast photosynthesis and cell respiration so that you have that for your portfolio. So what, cell respiration, we saw, right, with photosynthesis occurring over here in the thylakoids of the chloroplast. It's right here. What we're going to look at is what happens during cell respiration. Now, instead of taking place in the chloroplast the way photosynthesis did, our cell respiration is going to take place over in another organelle, the mitochondria. Now, green plants will have a mitochondria, obviously, as well as eukaryote. Any eukaryote is going to have a mitochondria. So that's why cell respiration can occur in many different organisms, not just green plants like and algae like photosynthesis, because we don't need chlorophyll for cell respiration to occur. So we're going to take a look at what's occurring inside the mitochondria, the molecules that are going to be produced, and then over here, the amount of energy. And remember, with photosynthesis, our energy was coming in the form of that monosaccharide, that glucose molecules. But we're going to get a lot of our energy being made over here in the form of ATP, adenosine triphosphate, that our individual cells are going to use for body processes and so on. So, that ATP, if we look at it over here, right? Adenine, we've got a sugar, ribose, and then we've got our 3 phosphates. That's where that T comes in, tri. In respiration, we end up getting a amount of energy occurring because we split the bond here between the second and the 3rd phosphate. So that's where we're going to get some of that energy from. And when we do that, we release energy, and we are then left with a molecule, adenosine diphosphate, indicating that we only will have those 2 phosphates left. Now, when we do that, when we go from ATP to ADP, we're releasing that phosphate so that we can release energy, we call this a de-energization reaction. Right? So that's what's happening there. Now you see, where is this occurring? Here within the cell membrane, we see things that we need, right? Our potassium becomes part of our whole reaction. Now you see something called, we really have three parts to cell respiration. Glycolysis, which is the first part, and that can be done either in the presence of oxygen or not in the presence of oxygen. We'll look at both of those. The citric acid cycle here is part 2, and then the electron transport chain is part 3. And we see the number of ATPs that are produced in these reactions. So we have a net of 2 in glycolysis, 2 more here in ATP, and the most energy is produced, the most ATP, and 32 of them in that electron transport chain. So we'll take a look at both of these pieces, and I'll break it down really specifically when we look at these things tomorrow. Today is just an overview. So any aerobic respiration, things that happen in the presence of oxygen, they require oxygen because oxygen has to be present. And those are where we get most of our ATP formed. And of course, anaerobic, whenever you put the letters A or AN in front of a word, aerobic is oxygen. Anaerobic means without oxygen. So we are doing things in the absence of oxygen. And because there is no oxygen, we have a very small amount of glucose that can be made. Now, glycolysis, that first stage of cell respiration here, starts, of course, with the glucose molecule, C6H12O6. And we break it down into 2 3-carbon pyruvic acid molecules. And then they can undergo one of 2 types of fermentation. The lactic acid fermentation, which we experience mostly in our muscles, and we'll take a look at that. And then ethanol or alcohol fermentation, which produces ethyl alcohol and carbon dioxide. So we'll take a look at both of those. So without oxygen, right, let's look at alcohol fermentation first. Occurs, yeast is kind of our catalyst here, and it's going to produce ethanol and carbon dioxide. I could move this out of the way. I don't think I can. I guess I can move that over. Here are the formulas down here. And whenever we can have a word formula too. That's what you see here. Yeast plus glucose gives us our ethanol. Where do we use this alcohol fermentation? Well, not only in the making of alcohol for brewing beer or things like that, but in the making of bread, yogurt. There's a lot of different uses for alcohol fermentation. So take a look at that. Now, the other type, lactic acid, where we have some ATP produced, here's our glucose coming in. Again, I always say follow the arrows, right? We got NAD coming in, NADH coming out. Here's our 2 3-carbon pyruvic acids. And instead of producing ethyl alcohol, we produce lactic acid. And that's what we'll take a look at right now. Now, in lactic acid fermentation, as our lactate levels go up, because lactate begins to store in our muscles can contract, and this can be very painful. That's why when somebody runs or does large amounts of exercise, they should always spend a good deal of time cooling those muscles down, right? Breaking down the lactate that's in those muscles so that you won't experience soreness. This graph kind of shows you, gives you an idea of, here's a person with a 50% lactic acid load. You can see over time that load goes up. 50% pulsating load and our 25% load. So, over time, if we can take the time to breathe in, bring in oxygen into the body, stretch the muscles out, get rid of that lactic acid, lactate from the muscles and the tissues, we can decrease the amount of pain and soreness that a person would feel. Now, this is an instrument that we call a respirometer. And this is one of the required labs that we would be doing if we were together. So this is just a look at the setup. We will do this as one of our required labs next year. And we will take a look at, seed germination and where the oxygen comes from, and, the carbon dioxide, all of those things we'll take a look at when we actually do this lab in person. So know that we will, when we're together next year, you'll be seniors, we'll duplicate this lab and see what our results come into play. And it will make this, I think, a little bit more easily understood when you actually can manipulate the variables and see what's going on yourselves. Right? So for this kind of intro or summary, remember, be able to define exactly what respiration is. Have an outline comparison. I'm going to give that to you. The applications of alcoholic fermentation and lactic acid fermentation. Remember, both of these are part of that initial stage of respiration, which is glycolysis. And then we'll worry about the use of respirometers later on next year, right, when we do that lab. So I'm going to load this into Google Classroom, and along with some notes, I'm going to give you my notes so that you have that introduction. I'm also going to give you a graph that I made that compares the types of cell respiration, either aerobic or anaerobic, and then a very short quiz using IB questions, right? And that you'll turn into me. And that will kind of set the stage for a detailed look at cell respiration on Thursday and then Friday. And then we will have covered everything on our concept map. And then Friday afternoon, I'll set up a Zoom so that we can get together. And then once we're together, I'll talk a little bit about the final exam, which is 10 questions, short answer essays that I will give to you then. And then, of course, it's due, I'll have till that Tuesday after Memorial Day to turn it in. on the exam day. So that'll be it. If you have any questions, just let me know. Thanks, girls.